Welcome to the Sketchbook Saga, everybody. This is week two's saga recap, where I go over all of the drawings I did throughout the week, or at least the main exercises that I did. I tell you how I feel about them, I tell you what I think I learned, and then some key takeaways. Now, this week, like the first week, is going to have a little bit of differences in that I'm going to go ahead and cover a few of the general channel things that I've done up front. So overall, in week two, I still haven't officially started posting these videos. I assure you, I'm diligently doing the drawings, I'm doing the practice, but I haven't started posting these because I don't have some of that clerical work out of the way. And that clerical work that I worked on this week is thumbnails. The thumbnails that I worked on, I just wanted them to be easy to replicate, meaning I don't want to spend a ton of time with my thumbnails. I don't want to have to be trying to do all these gotcha or clickbaity type thumbnails, but I want them to be branded and easily recognizable. So I've kind of gone in, I've picked some things that are really easy to read, I've picked some good color schemes, I've placed myself on there so you get to or have to look at me every single time, and then I've created some cutouts so that I can put the drawings in each picture itself. I think that's going to create a good thumbnail, but I would love to hear what you think about how I've created that so far. And so I'll be asking for this kind of feedback during these weekly talks. And I think all of the channel work that I'm doing, if you have thoughts, if you have feedback, anything at all, I'd love to hear it. That leads me into talking about other items. Do I need an introduction or a more visually appealing outro? Basically, do I need to add some animation after some of the welcomes that I do? Is that something that's fun, or is that just overproduction and not necessarily interesting? The only other change I made this week, of course, is that I have an office background now. This was basically a blank wall. We've had some issues in our house, and so we've kind of moved some things around. But we have some art up now, so you're not staring at just me and a deadpan black wall. Okay, well, let's move into talking about the drawings, the sketches, the art. That's what we're here for after all. So this week, we basically stuck with this 30-minute drawing for beginner's book. This book, out of the ones that I have, I don't know that I thought this was going to be my favorite, but I think this one has been my favorite as I've kind of read through here. This early portion of the book is focusing on developing fundamentals and creating a baseline for my artistic journey. And that's really important, right? You have to walk before you run, you've got to crawl before you walk, that kind of thing. And so I think building those baselines are really important. One of the things that I note that it's really always talking about is it talks about creating your guidelines. That's something that I haven't really gone over, but even just that proportional X that you create in the middle of your drawing before you get started. Something that helps you kind of split things into quadrants, something that helps you keep everything in proportion is really important. It's not something I did when I was younger. It's not something I necessarily think about doing as an adult. And hilariously, I needed a book to tell me to do that. Why did I need a book to tell me to do that? I'm not sure. Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe that's obvious to you. But I think in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to erase all this stuff. Oh, it's going to be messy. It's going to be in the way of seeing this hopefully beautiful drawing that I'm going to be creating. So that's something that I thought about. Also working through a sketch, basically having a step-by-step process to your drawing, right? You've got guidelines, then you've got the rough sketch, then you've got a detailed sketch, then you've got lining, where you're basically going in and actually adding the details. I want to be a pen and ink drawer long term. I think that that's a beautiful style. And so while I'm primarily working in graphite and charcoal and things of that nature now, I think knowing that in my head and working towards that is important. I also feel like I've been a bit bad at doing sketching. I don't know if I've really explained how I treat sketching, and maybe this is not even how the entire community treats it, but I see sketches as that very rough portion of a drawing where I might draw a circle 4 or 5 times before I go in there and line the circle with hopefully the best possible circular line out of that. I think everyone says this, it's fairly impossible to draw a circle free-handed, at least a perfect circle free-handed. Maybe some of you artists out there do a better job than I do, but I do find that difficult. Anyway, on to the drawings themselves. I won't go into too much detail on these. They're all in the videos, but we will cover a little bit of them. So I did 3 drawings this week. The drawings that I did were kind of a combination of contour exercises, both a shoe and a chair. The chair was done really because I felt like I had cheated on the negative space exercise. I did negative spaces with a plant last week. That wasn't really the purpose of negative spaces. You're supposed to grab these large negative spaces and draw outwards. And so a chair really is the most logical way to visualize that. When I did this, I found a couple of things. One of them is going to be a key takeaway later, and so we won't go into that. But I found that I really struggled with that. I got my proportions right, but I kind of lost some of the details I got in my head with the negative spaces. So this tactic doesn't really seem to work as well for me. However, if I shift my focus and think about what I think the purpose of the negative spaces is more than actually the negative spaces themselves, they're to find an anchor within your drawing, one key piece that you can build your proportions off of. I do feel like that was successful. And as I move forward throughout the week, applying that in my brain, I did improve. Now, the shoe exercises, this is primarily a detail or texture for me. The contour was really easy to get down, and I was surprised at how easy that was to get down. You know, it's so early, so I thought I would need more practice getting some of those things, but the textures are what really threw me for a loop. A shoe has a lot of textures you don't think about, right? There's the rubber on it, there's some mesh for breathing, there's the leather stitched, there's the cloth, and then there's the shoelaces and things themselves. And I feel like I did a poor job at doing the textures. And that's one of the things that long term I think I have to note is finding a bank in my head of textures. How do I draw these textures? Practicing drawing different textures is going to be really important. Okay, moving on, we then moved to a still life drawing. That still life drawing is to do overall, can you just take what you see and put it on paper? You know, that's all art is going to be, right? So eventually you get into creativity where you draw something you see in your mind, but that's really what we're looking for here. There were quite a few things in the still life drawing, right? I had a box, I had my coffee cup, and I had some dice that my wife gave me for my anniversary. There's a lot of different textures there. Those dice actually happen to be made out of aluminum. That was the anniversary it was for us. And so there were a lot of weird different textures and shines there. So again, I kind of struggled on the texture, but overall, I was very pleased at the way the shading went. I was very pleased at the way getting the overall spatial awareness down in that drawing. Here's where I feel like sketching is still something that I need practice on, though, because I could have done a looser sketch and then added the details better later. I kind of went more closer to my final line in my initial sketch. I skipped the overall rough sketch step. And I think that hurt the overall long-term quality of the drawing there. That's really the main thing that I would take away, because other than that, I felt really pleased here. I note that maybe I do rely a little bit too much on just the stump style shading. And I think that goes back to me not having that huge bank of textures in my brain. Let's go ahead and move on, though, to the single item detailed drawing. And that single item detailed drawing is going to be the PlayStation controller that I did. So why did I pick a PlayStation controller? Because I play quite a bit of video games, but I felt like it had quite a few little details to go into. The purpose of this one was to pick a simple object and really focus into the details. So I might have gone a little over detailed on my initial object, but it did have a lot of cool textures to it. And so I noted on this particular one that I feel like I did a lot better at sketching. I actually did get the rough everything in. I was drawing the buttons, I was drawing the overall, and the proportion and everything was really good. The recurring theme here was texture was still an issue, especially the joysticks and the holes in the front, but there were a lot of really interesting shadows in this. There were a lot of really interesting lines, and I had a lot of fun doing it. This was one that I was really pleased about at the end of the day, both in proportions. I missed a little bit in the striping and things of that nature, but overall, man, that looked like a controller to me, and that was really pleasing to see come together. So what are my main takeaways from the week? So I mentioned how I got better at sketching throughout the week. One of the things that I think heavily contributed to that was I started to add more stringent timelines. So my time limits, I was like, oh, it can be fuzzy. I'm going to draw for an hour anyway. So I would sit down and I would make a drawing for the channel, right? And I would have an hour to draw. And so even though I wasn't only going to draw for what I did for the channel, I probably would do some cubes or some other little sketching or things of that nature, just generic practice. Sometimes I would let myself fudge out and I'd be like, okay, like it's supposed to take 20 minutes for this drawing. Oh, I'll do 30 or I'll do 35. And what I noted was that was gimping me on my sketches because, well, I could afford the time to try to do the detail straight out the gate. And so I would erase my lines. I would do it over and over and over again. Time limits are good. I recommend them wholeheartedly for anybody else who is starting their journey, or if you just find that you spend too much time trying to circumvent the process. Because I do think that overall this is actually going to speed you up. That's going to speed me up to focus a little bit more on the sketches early. Also, drawing something you like really matters. The drawing I like the least from this week is the drawing of the chair. And I found that while I only spent 10 minutes on it, it felt like the longest time that I spent drawing anything, and I was the least pleased with it at the end of the day. So draw something you like. Drawing something you like really matters. Even though I'm kind of shoehorning in some of these other things that I want to draw for the task at hand, I engage with it more. I'm more excited to do it. And after all, it's a pastime that you should enjoy. So don't force yourself to go draw an apple if you're not interested in drawing an apple, unless you are further along in your artistic career in which practicing that type of shape is going to be crucially important to you. The other thing I want to note here, I mentioned a couple times I did some additional practice outside of these videos. One of the things is cubes. Cubes is something I was shocked that I did so poorly in the still life drawing with the dice. And so I was like, oh, I need to go and I need to start practicing these. I need to think about how they look in space. I need to think about how they would look as they get closer or further away. I need to think about how to rotate them so that I can picture a box or something of that nature at any given time. I'm going to flash what my practice looked like up on the screen here. It was rough. Like I said, I was shocked at how difficult that was. And so I would also say, practice your shapes. You're going to see me do that in the coming weeks. Some drawings specifically based around each and every basic shape. Cube, cylinder, your cones, your spheres, things of that nature. But really practice those. I think that was interesting. The other thing is I mentioned drawing something you like really matters. So my son has been seeing me draw. I'm going to flash some of our terrible drawings up on the screen here. He has wanted to come and draw with me. So he would say, hey, Dad, draw a bunny, a fire bunny. And he would draw one, and then he would have me draw one. And he would want me to draw that right next to me. And then he was like, oh, I want to draw your wallet because it was sitting out on the table. And so he drew it, and then I drew it next to him. We talked about how we did those drawings. I mean, he's 5, so his drawings are pretty loose here. But that gave me so much joy. And so I do want to make sure that I am sharing that here as well. Other than that, hey, I'm not perfect, and I will and want to try to improve, not just my art, but in the channel. So thank you very much, Juan, if you've stayed with me this long. I hope to see you again every week. If there's anything that I can do to improve, please let me know in the comment. And other than that, I will see you next week.